He hired me to read, but the books were about me. I thought it was going to be the easiest job of my life. In fact, when I first saw the listing, I laughed. Seeking quiet, articulate individual for weekday reading sessions. Must be punctual. $40 per hour. 2 hours daily. No experience required. That was it. No company name. No contact info besides a single phone number typed in a clean serif font at the bottom of the ad. I found it taped to a corkboard at the university's career center, yellowing around the edges as though it had been there longer than anyone realized. I took the tab and called that same day. A woman answered, no greeting, no hello, not even a who's this. I stumbled into it. Hi, I'm calling about the reading job. A beat of silence. Then, yes. Can you come tomorrow at 9? I hesitated, thrown off by her abruptness. Yes, sure. Where? She gave me the address, recited slowly like she already knew I'd need to write it down twice. Before I could ask anything else, who I'd be reading to, how long the job would last, whether it was safe, she hung up. I should have questioned it more. But the pay was good. And after a disastrous semester and a summer full of rejection emails, I was desperate. So the next morning, I took a bus across town, walked 20 minutes up a gravel road, and found myself standing in front of what looked like a house that time forgot. The Ellery estate was perched on a slight hill, half swallowed by tangled ivy and the skeletal fingers of bare trees, even though it was only October. It was the kind of place you imagine when someone says old money, high gables, gray stone, windows that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Depression. The front gate groaned when I pushed it open, and the gravel crunched under my shoes like I was stepping on bones. A woman in a gray blouse and slacks met me at the door. Not old, not young. Hard to place, like everything about that house. You're the reader? She asked, as if she already knew I was. I guess so, I said, suddenly unsure. She gave a short nod and opened the door wider. The inside of the house was warm, but not comfortable. It smelled like old books, furniture polish, and something faintly metallic. I followed her down a long hallway with faded paintings on the walls, seascapes, ships, a few unmarked portraits, and into a room that seemed transported from another century. It was a library, or maybe a study. Towering shelves lined the walls, packed tight with books that didn't look like they'd been touched in decades. A fire flickered in the hearth, and a green-shaded lamp cast a pool of light over a long leather couch and an armchair so worn the arms had molded into the shape of elbows. Seated in the armchair was a man who looked more like a statue than a person. Mr. Ellery, the woman said, her voice softer now. Your reader is here. The man turned his head slightly toward me. His eyes were cloudy, pupils like milk-glass marbles. His skin was pale and loose around the bones, and he wore a charcoal gray sweater over navy trousers. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, still and patient. Good morning, he said. Good morning, I replied, forcing a smile. The woman handed me a book. It had no title, no author name. The spine was cracked, the pages slightly yellowed. She gestured toward a smaller chair near the lamp. You'll read here. 2 hours. Monday to Friday, she said. Same time. Then she left, closing the door behind her without a sound. That first day, I stumbled a lot. The words were in English, but the syntax was strange, almost archaic. I tripped over phrases I'd never seen, names I didn't recognize, places that didn't exist. Mr. Ellery didn't seem to mind. He only interrupted when I mispronounced something, which he'd correct in the softest voice imaginable, polite, firm, and just a little amused. Try again, he'd say. Keep reading. I did. For 2 hours. Then I left. And came back the next day. And the day after. By the end of the week, I had the routine down to muscle memory. Bus. Walk. Gate. Reading. Silence. Leave. No phones allowed inside. No small talk. Just the words, the fire, and that ever-present stare of a man who couldn't see me but seemed to know exactly where I was in the room at all times. And the books. Always a different one, always unlabeled. He handed them to me each morning like they'd just been delivered, though I never saw anyone else bring them in. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. The stories were old, literary, with a kind of gothic flavor, strange towns, family curses, odd customs, and rituals. Sometimes they read like memoirs, other times like folklore. And always with a creeping sense of dread just under the surface. But by the third book, I noticed something I couldn't explain. The protagonist's name was Henry. My name. I brushed it off. Coincidence, I told myself. Henry's not that uncommon. But the next book had a Henry too. Younger this time. Living in a city that sounded suspiciously like the one I grew up in. Same age. Same dark hair and habit of biting his lip when nervous. He even had a younger sister named Clara. My sister's name. I stopped reading halfway through a sentence. Something wrong? Mr. Ellery asked, not turning his head. I stared at the page. This story. It's familiar. Is it? He asked in a tone that was neither surprised nor interested. Yes, I said. It's about me. At least it feels like it is. A pause. Then keep reading. I swallowed, hesitated, and kept going. But the words felt heavier now, like each syllable dragged something invisible along with it. That day, I left with a headache and the strange feeling that I'd said too much. The next morning, the book was waiting for me on the table when I arrived. Mr. Ellery sat exactly as before. The fire burned. The silence stretched. I didn't want to open the book, but I did. This time, the story began with a boy walking through a forest he didn't remember entering. He found a house. An old man inside asked him to read. The boy accepted. The description was uncanny. Word for word, the house matched the Ellery estate. The fire, the green-shaded lamp, even the scratch on the wooden floor near the base of the chair. I'd never even noticed it before, but when I looked, it was there, exactly as described. I closed the book. I think there's been some kind of mistake, I said. Mr. Ellery turned his head slowly toward me. A mistake. These books. Why are they about me? He smiled then. The first time I'd seen him do it. It wasn't warm. They're not about you, he said. You're about them. What does that mean? He leaned back in the chair, folding his hands over his chest. It means you are not the reader you think you are, Henry. Something clicked in my chest. A soundless shiver. I stood up. I should go. He didn't stop me. Didn't say a word as I left the room, the house, the gate. The whole walk home, I kept checking over my shoulder like I was being watched by something I couldn't name. That night, I didn't sleep. I dreamed of a firelit room and a man with glass eyes whispering my name over and over again. When I woke up, my throat was dry and the palms of my hands were covered in ink, as if I'd fallen asleep with a pen and written something, though my notebook was blank. The next day, I didn't go to the house. Neither did I the day after that. But on the third day, there was a knock on my apartment door. No one was there when I opened it, just a package. No address. No stamp. Inside, a book. Unlabeled. Heavy. I flipped it open. The first line read, Henry stood in the doorway, staring down at the package with his name written in ink so dark it looked wet. And then I heard it. A voice behind me. Soft. Precise. Keep reading. I was still clutching the book from the doorstep. The one that knew too much. I didn't open it again that night. I couldn't. I left it on my kitchen counter, turned upside down like that would somehow mute its presence. As if hiding the words could make them forget me. But the weight of it still echoed. I sat on the floor beside the couch, phone in my hand, trying to decide if I should call the police, a friend, a therapist, anyone. But what would I even say? A blind man I read to gave me a magic book that's writing my life in real time? No one would believe me. Hell, I didn't believe me. And yet, there it was. The street I'd grown up on. The red mailbox we spray-painted one Halloween. The bike ramp that collapsed under me when I was 10, shattering my front tooth. I'd never told anyone that the tattoo I got at 17 wasn't fake like I'd claimed. Not my sister. Not even the girl I got it with. But the book knew. It was the precision that broke me. Not just facts, but the way things were described. The angle of my house's front porch. The crunch of gravel when my stepdad came home too drunk to keep quiet. The ache behind my ribs when I used to cry silently into the bedsheets. Not just like me. Me. The next morning, I didn't have a choice. I had to go back. When I arrived at the Ellery estate, the woman at the door didn't look surprised. She stepped aside without a word, leading me once more down the long corridor with its decaying paintings and still air. The door to the reading room was already open. Mr. Ellery sat waiting, motionless as ever, dressed in the same charcoal sweater and navy pants. A fresh book sat beside him on the table and the fireplace flickered like it hadn't gone out once in my absence. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. We didn't greet each other. I sat down, reached for the book. I didn't want to open it. My hand hovered over the cover, but some invisible string tugged me forward, drawing my fingers to the spine, urging the crack of the binding like a breath being held. I started reading. It began as a story, not about me, at least not at first. A nameless boy wandered a highway alone at dusk. He didn't know where he was or how he'd gotten there. As he walked, he began to remember. The details were muddy, broken, but one by one, the pieces fit together. A college dorm, a blackout, a scream he wasn't sure was real. I slowed as I read the next paragraph. Mud, blood, jeans soaked to the calf. the rusted edge of a stranger's garden fence. I stopped reading. My mouth had gone dry. I looked up at Mr. Ellery, feeling my heartbeat behind my eyes. "This," I said, barely above a whisper, "this is about me." He didn't reply, just smiled faintly, tilting his head as if listening to music only he could hear. I stood. "This is impossible." "It's not," he said. "No one knew about that night. No one. I didn't even tell myself. I've spent years pretending it didn't happen." "You didn't have to tell," he said, his voice gentle. "The page already knew." "What does that mean?" My voice cracked. "What is this?" He leaned forward slightly, cloudy eyes never quite meeting mine. "You wrote it," he said. "No," I replied. "I didn't." "You will." I left. I stormed out of that house without another word, pushed past the woman in gray, didn't wait for the bus. I walked for nearly an hour, barely aware of my surroundings, my breath visible in the cold morning air as my thoughts spiraled. He was messing with me. That had to be it. Someone was feeding him information. Maybe it was Clara or someone from my past I didn't remember. Maybe I'd been followed, hacked, filmed. There had to be some rational explanation. But deep down, I knew better. Some of those memories, the one behind the stranger's shed, especially, weren't just private. They were locked, buried so far down even I hadn't accessed them in years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that page. The way the sentences unfolded me. The way the ink practically bled truth. The next morning, I woke to find another book on my doorstep. No knock, no note, just the same heavy, unlabeled volume. I sat on my couch with the book in my lap, unopened. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if I should burn it or read it, or if those were, somehow, the same thing. I opened it. It wasn't about me. Not exactly. It was about a girl named Mara who had a brother with dark hair and a chipped tooth and a tattoo he regretted. The brother disappeared after visiting an old man in a forgotten mansion. He stopped calling, stopped showing up to class. And then one day, Mara received a package. Inside, a book. The last line on the page read, Mara opened the book and found her brother staring back at her from the first line. I slammed it shut. My chest hurt. My hands were numb. I nearly threw the book across the room. But I couldn't. I couldn't do anything but sit there and wonder. Was that my future? Was I becoming a character in someone else's story? Worse, was I becoming one of Ellery's stories? I called Clara that night, just to hear her voice. "Hey," she answered. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just wanted to check in." She talked about work, about our mom, about the weather in Atlanta. I barely listened. I just let her voice anchor me to something real. Something outside that house and the books and the man with clouded eyes who somehow knew me better than I knew myself. When she asked if something was wrong, I told her no. Because how do you explain to someone that a blind man is writing your life in real time? Or worse, that you're the one who will write it? I didn't go back for a week, but the books didn't stop. Each morning, one would appear, always on my doorstep, always waiting. They stopped being about the past. They began describing things I hadn't done yet. First, it was small details. Cafe I would visit. A phone call I hadn't made but later would. I started testing it, going to different stores, taking different buses. But no matter what I changed, the book always described exactly what happened. Eventually, it began to predict my thoughts, conversations, my dreams. There was no more pretending. I returned to the house. When the woman opened the door, she gave me a long, unreadable look before stepping aside. "I shouldn't be here," I said as I walked down the corridor. "Then why are you?" she asked without turning. I had no answer. When I entered the room, Mr. Ellery was waiting, as if I'd never left. Another book sat beside him. I didn't want to pick it up, but I did. The first line, Henry returned. "You said I'd write it. What does that mean? Are you saying I'm the one creating these books?" He smiled, soft, proud. "You're not creating them," he said. "You're remembering them." I froze. "What?" "They're not prophecies, Henry. Not fiction. They're memory. Yours. But not from now." I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense." It will. He leaned back, folding his hands together in his lap. Time is not a line, Henry. It's a spiral. And your story has already been written. I felt dizzy. I don't remember writing any of this. He gestured toward the book. Not yet. The rest of that session is a blur. I read because I didn't know what else to do. I read as though the words could stitch my sanity back together. I read because part of me feared what would happen if I didn't. But one thing changed that day. I noticed something. In the corner of the last page, barely visible, almost a watermark, was my handwriting. A note I'd written. Or would write. 2 words. Don't stop. I didn't go back. Didn't show up on Monday. Didn't text. Didn't collect my final paycheck. I blocked the number that used to confirm my hours. Ignored 3 voicemails, each more clipped than the last, from the woman in gray. I told myself I imagined it all. That it was some elaborate manipulation, a con pulled off by a lonely old man with a good memory and a messed up sense of entertainment. I rehearsed every rational explanation like a mantra. Stress. Lack of sleep. Suggestibility. Coincidence. But no matter how many times I repeated it, the image wouldn't leave my head. That cold, dust-filtered room. The way the light hit the green-shaded lamp like a stage spotlight. The slow tick of the grandfather clock that seemed to echo beneath my skin. And the way I had read again and again, not stories, but me. I stopped sleeping well. Or sleeping at all. My dreams became cluttered with words, thick, looping cursive like smoke on a window pane. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced I could hear the whisper of pages turning just beyond the walls of my bedroom. I tried to live normally. Tried to forget. But that house stayed inside me. The package arrived 4 days later. There was no knock. No sound. Just a small, square cardboard box sitting neatly on my doormat like it had grown there. No return address. No postage. Inside was a single leather-bound book. Same as the others. No title. No markings. No hint of where it had come from or how it had gotten there. The leather was warm in my hands. I should have thrown it away. Burned it. Buried it somewhere deep and unmarked. But I didn't. Of course I didn't. Instead, I opened it. The first page hit like a punch to the chest. I told myself I wouldn't read it. I told myself I was done. But curiosity wins when fear gets tired. I froze. I had just thought that. Not spoken it. Not even consciously formed the words. But there they were. Word for word. Exactly as they'd occurred in my head. I turned the page with trembling fingers. He flipped the page, eyes dry but stinging. The lamp behind him hummed faintly, casting his shadow across the kitchen counter. He didn't want to keep going, but he already had. I looked up. The lamp behind me was humming. Faint, but constant. My shadow was stretching across the counter exactly the way the book described. It wasn't a recounting anymore. It was live. Real-time narration of the present. I kept reading, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop. He told himself he'd just read until the end of the chapter. But when he flipped to the last page, the words waiting there made his blood run cold. I hesitated. I didn't want to know. But of course, I flipped to the end. And what I read made my knees buckle. He dies in the house. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. And when it happens, he won't even try to leave. Because by then he will have written the ending himself. I dropped the book. Let it fall with a dull thud to the floor. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, my mind splintering into 1,000 flashing thoughts. This was impossible. This was not possible. No one could know that. No one could write in real time. And no one could predict that I would write my own death. But the book had never been wrong. Not once. I stared down at it like it might leap up and bite me. And then I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I poured a glass of whiskey. Then another. Somewhere around 3 a.m. I picked the book up again. The page had changed. New words had formed. Where once it ended, now the narrative extended. I flipped back 3 pages. More had been added there too. It was still writing. Not just in real time, but continuously, as if the story were being sculpted from the air around me. I read faster, trying to catch it. Like if I could flip fast enough, I'd beat it to the punch. See what came before it was meant to happen. But the text was always just ahead of me, like someone whispering into the next room, just out of reach. 3 days passed. Then a week. The books didn't stop coming. Every morning, a new one appeared. Each darker than the last. One described the inside of my apartment in horrifying detail, every stain on the carpet, every dish in the sink, the exact number of crumbs beside the toaster. Another cataloged my dreams, ones I hadn't even remembered having until I read them in ink. There was one that described my death in a dozen different ways. One in the woods behind Ellery's estate. One on the train tracks I used to dare myself to walk alone. One especially vivid where I woke in the reading room, wrists bound and pages torn from the books, and Mr. Ellery said, "Only we finish what we begin." I threw that one in the trash. But the next morning it was back on my desk, open to the same page. That afternoon I tried to leave town. Packed a duffel bag. Didn't tell anyone. Got in my car and drove north for 6 hours without stopping. I made it to a small town on the edge of a lake. Got a motel room under a fake name. Didn't bring the books. Didn't tell the front desk my number. I thought I'd beaten it. I thought I could outrun the spiral. Until I opened the nightstand drawer and found a leather-bound book waiting. No title. Just a single line, dead center on the first page. He really thought this would work. I slammed the drawer shut and left the room without taking my bag. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't trust my own mind. I stopped sleeping altogether. I stopped eating unless I had to. I kept my phone off, but it didn't matter. The books still came. They showed up inside my fridge. My mailbox. Once stacked in the passenger seat of my locked car. I started to feel like a puppet. Like each decision I made wasn't mine, but something the book had nudged me toward. And I kept asking myself, if I am the one writing this, then who am I when I'm not reading? When the 12th book arrived, I did something different. I didn't open it. I burned it. Carried it to the sink, doused it in vodka, lit a match, and watched it hiss and shrivel and curl into ash. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I slept that night, deeply. But when I woke the next morning, it was there again. Not a new book. The same one. Unburned. Sitting at the foot of my bed. Waiting. There was only one thing left to do. The next morning I showered. Got dressed. Put on the sweater I hadn't worn since my first week at the mansion. I didn't take the bus. I walked. And as I approached the Ellery estate for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel dread. I felt something worse. Familiarity. As if I'd always known I'd be back. And that somewhere inside those pages, a door was waiting to open. The last page was almost blank, except for one line. He stopped reading and looked up just in time to see the man in the charcoal sweater standing behind him. I was sitting alone in my apartment. Or so I thought. My first instinct wasn't fear. It was denial. A stupid, hollow kind of disbelief that felt more like hope wearing a cheap disguise. It's a coincidence, I told myself. You're reading into it. It's a trick. There's no one there. There can't be. But something shifted in the air behind me. It wasn't sound exactly. It was the absence of it. Like a vacuum had opened up behind my back. A stillness that wasn't there a second ago. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My breath caught in my throat like a hooked fish. My hands shook. The book, still open in my lap, seemed to grow heavier with each second. Then, slowly, as if on cue, the silence broke. A soft creak. Floorboard. Directly behind me. I closed the book. Not slammed. Not dropped. Just closed it precisely, firmly, like sealing the lid on a box that should never have been opened. And I did the only thing my body would allow. I burned it. I moved like I wasn't controlling myself. Like I'd rehearsed this before. Like I'd seen this exact scene play out in one of the earlier books. I carried it to the sink, poured whiskey over the pages, and lit a match. The fire took instantly. The leather shriveled. The ink bled and bubbled. The flames hissed like they'd been hungry for years. And then it was gone. Smoke. Ash. The soft crackle of charred spine giving way. The scent of fire and old paper choking the air. And behind me nothing. No creak. No shadow. No man in a charcoal sweater. Just silence. And the sound of my own heart trying to climb out of my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. I told myself it was over. That I'd broken the chain. That destroying the book ended whatever strange grip it had on me. But deep down, I knew better. The story doesn't end because you stop reading it. It just waits. 3 days passed. No book. No package. No sign of Mr. Ellery or the woman in gray. No mysterious knocks. No more self-writing manuscripts arriving like ghosts on my doorstep. I tried to act normal again. Went to the corner store. Did laundry. Even visited my sister, though I didn't tell her why I looked like I'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. "I thought you were dead," she said, half joking. "You look like you saw a ghost." I just smiled. Because dead didn't feel like the right word. Not yet. Then came last night. And everything changed. I woke at 2:13 a.m. exactly. No dream. No noise. Just the sudden sensation that I wasn't alone. I sat up. My apartment was dark, quiet, perfectly still. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. And then I noticed it. A book, sitting at the foot of my bed. Not delivered. Not left on the counter or slipped in a drawer. Just there. Like it had grown from the shadows. Same size. Same leather binding. Blank cover. But something was different. I could feel it. The air around it shimmered like heat above asphalt. I could almost hear it humming. I didn't want to touch it. But I did. My fingers brushed the cover and recoiled. Warm. Not room temperature. Not ambient. Warm, like it had been held. Like it had a pulse. And then I noticed the title. There was one, this time. Stamped into the leather, pressed so lightly it nearly vanished under the flickering hallway light. The author. My mouth went dry. I didn't open it right away. I took it into the living room, placed it on the table, and circled it like it might explode. I poured a drink. Drank it. Poured another. And then finally I sat down and opened it. The first page was blank. The second too. Then, in crisp, dark ink, words began to appear. Not slowly. Not in real time. All at once. You burned the last book, but you didn't stop the story. You just made room for the final chapter. There's only one way this ends. But the end is up to you now. He picked up the pen and realized it wasn't the house or the books or Mr. Ellery. It was him. I read it twice. Then a third time. And beneath those lines, in fresh, gleaming ink, one final sentence bloomed as I watched. He opened his mouth to scream, but what came out wasn't his voice. I dropped the book. Stumbled back. Felt something in my throat pressure like I'd swallowed a fist. Then, a sound. A low rasp. Not quite human. Dry. Measured. And not coming from outside me. From me. I clutched my chest. Tried to call out. But when I spoke, the voice wasn't mine. Not even close. It was old. Calm. Patient. And eerily familiar. I collapsed to the floor. When I came to, the book was closed. Still warm. And sitting in my lap. On top of it, an old fountain pen. Dark green. Gold tip. The initials E carved along its side. I knew what it meant. I knew what I had to do. And even as every part of me screamed don't, I picked it up. I opened to the last page. It was blank again. The pen was full. The ink shimmered like oil in candlelight. My hand began to move. Not because I wanted it to, but because I had to. And I wrote. Chapter 5, in which the author returns to the house one last time to finish what he started. Another package. Same as before. Brown paper. No tape. No label. No postage. But this time it was already opened. Not torn. Not ripped. Just unfolded. Like someone had gently peeled it back and left it that way as if to say, you know what to do. Inside was another book. Leather-bound. Same texture. Same weight. Same scent of dust and age and inevitability. But this one was colder than the rest. Not by temperature. By feeling. Like holding a dead bird. I didn't pick it up right away. Didn't even look at it for a while. I just sat across from it, staring. Watching the book watch me. Because that's what it felt like now, not an object. Not a thing. But a presence. A mirror I hadn't looked into yet. The longer I waited, the heavier the air got. Like something was holding its breath. Eventually, I opened the cover. Just the first page. It didn't wait. There was no slow bleed of words. No delay. Just one line, sitting there like it had been written long before I arrived. You can burn the book, but the story continues. I stared at it. My first instinct was to close it again. To toss it into the fire like I'd done before. But I didn't. Because this time, I felt it. A pressure behind the words. A hum beneath them. Something different. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was an invitation. Or maybe a demand. I didn't open the next page. Not yet. Because something in me knew. This one was different. It wasn't just a record of what had happened. Or what was happening. It was waiting. Waiting for me to do something I hadn't done yet. Something it wanted. Something unfinished. I sat with that feeling for a long time. Let it wrap around me. Settle into my bones. And then I realized the book wasn't writing itself anymore. It was waiting for me to write. Waiting for me to decide what comes next. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. All the stories, all the pages, all the impossible details. They weren't just predictions. They were blueprints, scripts, drafts of a future that hadn't happened yet. And now, for the first time, the pen wasn't in someone else's hand. I turned the book over in my hands, felt the smooth leather under my fingers, the edges of the pages cool against my skin. I didn't open it further, didn't need to, because this time, I knew the next line hadn't been written yet. Not by Ellery, not by the house, not by whoever or whatever had been watching from behind the page. This time, the blank space belonged to me. But here's the truth. Blank pages are dangerous. They offer freedom, but they also expect choices. And now that I've seen what the story can do, how it bends and breathes and waits, I'm not sure if I want to pick up the pen. Because if I do, I become the one writing the ending. And endings are heavy things. Final, permanent, sharp. But maybe the scariest part isn't writing it. Maybe the scariest part is realizing I already did. Somewhere between the first chapter and now. Between the moment I walked into that mansion and the moment I thought I could walk away. Because if the book is still writing itself, if it's still here, still waiting, still listening, then the story isn't over. Not yet. And someone is definitely still holding the pen. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's both.